Most people play Silent Hill the wrong way. Not because they miss the lore, not because they fail to understand the monsters, but because they make the series too small. People usually reduce Silent Hill to two things: cult horror, gods, rituals, prophecy, churches, the town's dark history, or psychological horror, guilt, trauma, repression, grief, and monsters as reflections of the mind. Both readings are real, but neither is enough, because Silent Hill is not really about cults, and it is not really about psychology. Those are just the languages it uses. What Silent Hill is really about is humanity trying to find meaning in pain, in guilt, in grief, in sex, in shame, in dreams, in suffering that refuses to make sense. That is what makes the series so powerful. Human beings cannot stand meaningless pain. We turn it into punishment, fate, trauma, religion, destiny, anything that makes it bearable. Silent Hill takes that instinct and turns it into horror. In this town, meaning does not stay in the mind. It becomes flesh. It becomes space. It becomes nightmare. That is why Silent Hill feels bigger than a story about a cult or a broken person. It feels like a place where suffering becomes visible. And that is the mistake people make. They think Silent Hill is asking to be solved. It is not. It is asking to be faced. Because you are not just walking through fog. You are staring into an abyss. And the horror begins when it stares back. The biggest mistake people make with Silent Hill is splitting it in half. On one side, they put the cult games: Silent Hill 1, Silent Hill 3, rituals, gods, prophecy, churches, and the town's dark religious history. On the other side, they put the psychological games, Silent Hill 2 especially, guilt, repression, trauma, desire, and monsters as reflections of the protagonist's mind. And that split sounds useful at first, but it quietly reduces the series into two simpler versions than it really is. Because Silent Hill was never choosing between religion and psychology. It was showing how close those things already are. Both are ways human beings try to explain suffering. Religion gives pain a higher purpose. Psychology gives pain an inner cause. One makes suffering sacred, the other makes it personal. Silent Hill uses both because Silent Hill is interested in what happens when neither explanation is enough. That is why the town feels so unstable. It is never just a cursed place, but it is never just a damaged mind either. It is the space where belief, guilt, memory, punishment, and desire all start bleeding together. So when people call one game the cult one and another the trauma one, they are not completely wrong. They are just stopping too early. Because in Silent Hill, the cult is not separate from human pain. And human pain is never separate from something larger, stranger, and harder to name. That is the real pattern of the series. Not two different kinds of horror, but one abyss wearing different faces. If Silent Hill is not really about cults or psychology, then what is it about? At its core, Silent Hill is about humanity trying to find meaning in suffering. That is the real center of the series. Pain, guilt, sex, shame, grief, disease, dreams, death. Silent Hill keeps returning to the moments in life that hurt the most, confuse us the most, and stay with us the longest. And then it asks a terrifying question. What if those things did not stay inside us? What if guilt could shape a place? What if grief could change the world around you? What if desire, shame, faith, or memory could become something physical? That is why Silent Hill feels so different from ordinary horror. It is not just showing people in pain. It is showing pain becoming real. And that matters because human beings are always trying to explain suffering. We turn it into punishment, or fate, or trauma, or religion, or destiny, or a lesson. We need pain to mean something because meaningless pain is unbearable. Silent Hill understands that instinct better than almost any horror series ever made. That is why the town feels less like a setting and more like a machine for revelation. It takes whatever people are trying to bury, justify, explain, or survive, and gives it form. That is the real horror of Silent Hill. Not just that people suffer, but that suffering answers back. This is why the cult matters. Not because Silent Hill is secretly just a story about evil religion, but because the cult is one of the clearest examples of people trying to force meaning onto the unknown. That is what a cult does. It takes suffering, fear, and mystery and turns them into structure, into prophecy, into ritual, into paradise, into God. In Silent Hill, the town is already filled with pain, memory, and spiritual rot. The cult does not simplify that. It gives it a language. That is why Silent Hill 1 and 3 matter so much. They show people looking into something vast and terrifying, then trying to control it by naming it, worshipping it, and building a belief system around it. That is not separate from the rest of the series. That is the series. Because the cult is doing on a larger scale what every character does on a personal one, trying to explain pain in a way they can survive. That is why the religious side of Silent Hill works so well. It is not just creepy lore, it is humanity trying to turn the abyss into doctrine, and that is terrifying. Because once suffering becomes sacred, people stop trying to escape it. They start trying to give birth to it. The psychological reading matters too. In fact, it is probably the reason so many people fell in love with Silent Hill in the first place. Silent Hill 2 especially taught people to see the series through guilt, repression, grief, shame, and desire. And that reading is not wrong. James is not just walking through a haunted town. He is walking through something shaped by what he cannot face. That is what makes the game so powerful. But this is where people stop too early. They turn Silent Hill into a symbol chart. This monster means this. This room means that. This character represents one emotion. And once you do that, the horror gets smaller. Because Silent Hill is not just saying the mind creates metaphors. It is saying inner suffering can become a world. That is the difference. James, Angela, and Eddie are not just carrying pain. They are moving through realities shaped by it. Their guilt, shame, anger, and despair do not stay private. They become spaces, encounters, and nightmares that can be lived in. So yes, Silent Hill is psychological horror, but not in the simple way people often mean. It is not just about damaged minds. It is about what happens when the things inside the mind stop staying there. This is what makes Silent Hill truly terrifying. Not just that its characters feel guilt, grief, or desire, but that those things stop being feelings and start becoming reality. In most horror, pain stays symbolic. In Silent Hill, it becomes physical. A memory becomes a place. A fear becomes a creature. A punishment becomes a ritual. A private shame becomes something that can walk toward you. That is why Silent Hill feels so much heavier than ordinary psychological horror. It is not just asking what a person feels. It is asking what happens when meaning itself takes form. And once that happens, the town stops feeling like a backdrop. It starts feeling alive. Not alive in a simple, literal way, but alive as a space where human suffering is constantly being translated into flesh, sound, architecture, and nightmare. That is the real move Silent Hill makes. It does not just reflect pain, it manifests it. This is also why sexuality matters so much in Silent Hill. Not for shock, not just for style, but because sex is one of the deepest places where human beings attach meaning, shame, fear, desire, guilt, and identity. Silent Hill understands that the body is never just the body. It is where people feel exposed, where they feel wanted or unwanted, where desire and disgust can exist at the same time, where vulnerability becomes humiliation, where pleasure, sickness, memory, and self-hatred can all blur together. That is why so much of Silent Hill feels bodily. The horror is not just in the mind. It is in flesh, in movement, in sound, in the way the games make the human body feel damaged, tempting, sick, violated, or unstable. And that matters because it pushes the series even deeper into human nature. Silent Hill is not just asking what people believe, it is asking what they want, what they regret, what they fear, and what they cannot bear to admit about themselves. That is why the series feels so intimate, because it does not just haunt the soul, it humiliates the body too. This is where Silent Hill starts to feel like cosmic horror. Not because it has tentacles, ancient monsters, or the universe collapsing, but because it creates the same fear through human suffering. Cosmic horror is terrifying because it places people in front of something too vast to fully understand. Something bigger than their language, bigger than their beliefs, bigger than their minds. Silent Hill does the same thing, but instead of reaching that abyss through space, it reaches it through guilt, grief, sex, memory, faith, and pain. That is what makes the series so disturbing. The deeper its characters search for meaning, the less stable reality becomes. The more they try to understand what is happening, the more they are swallowed by it. That is cosmic horror at its core. The moment human understanding stops protecting us. And that is exactly what Silent Hill keeps doing. It gives people just enough meaning to keep moving forward, then reminds them that whatever they are facing is still bigger than them. That is why the town never feels fully solved, why it always feels deeper than any one interpretation, why it feels less like a mystery to decode and more like an abyss to enter. Silent Hill does not just ask what is haunting its characters. It asks what happens when human beings look for meaning in the dark and discover that the dark is already looking back. And this is why Silent Hill so often feels like hell. Not necessarily hell in the strict religious sense, but as a place where the inner life is no longer hidden, where guilt is exposed, where desire becomes punishment, where grief becomes a prison, where the things people try to bury are dragged into the open and made impossible to escape. That is what makes the town feel so spiritually terrifying. Silent Hill does not just hurt its characters, it reveals them. It strips away distance between what they feel and what surrounds them, between sin and consequence, between memory and judgment, between suffering and meaning. That is why the town feels less like a haunted place and more like a threshold. A place where private pain becomes public, where the soul is forced outward, where a person is no longer allowed to hide behind explanation. And that is what makes Silent Hill feel so close to hell. Not because it gives easy answers, but because it feels like a place where human beings are made to face what they are. So if that is what Silent Hill really is, then the wrong way to play it becomes obvious. You do not play Silent Hill like a puzzle to solve. You do not play it like a list of symbols to decode. And you definitely do not play it like it is just about insane people, trauma, or a creepy cult. Because the moment you reduce it to that, the series gets smaller. The right way to play Silent Hill is to treat it like a confrontation, not just with monsters, but with meaning itself, with the way human beings explain pain, with the way they turn suffering into guilt, faith, shame, punishment, destiny, or revelation, with the way they stare into the unknown and desperately try to give it a name. That is what the town is always pushing its characters to do. And in that sense, the player is not outside the experience. The player does the same thing. You look for answers. You try to connect symbols. You try to make the nightmare manageable. But Silent Hill is strongest when it resists that. When it forces you to realize that understanding it is not the same as containing it. That is the shift. You are not supposed to stand above Silent Hill and explain it away. You are supposed to enter it knowing you are facing something deeper than plot. Something spiritual, something human, something abyssal. And once you see the series that way, everything changes.